And we're live. So there we go. And we're just going to start. And eventually someone will view. I know Susan will view here in a minute, but anyway. All right. Well, hey, everyone. It's time for Geocache Talk. Whether you're at work, in the car, or wherever you are, we hope you're enjoying the show. Please give it a like and subscribe on iTunes so that you can get all the weekly Geocache Talk goodness. A big thanks to Doug Jones and Joshua Slinkard for being patrons of the show. If you'd like to find out more about being part of that Patreon, head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/Geocache Talk for more details. Today I have on the show my friend DarrylW4. We have geocaching news and our weekly product tip. So let's jump right into show number 1 for Sunday, June 12th, 2016. And thank you, Darryl, for being part of show number 1.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to be on show number 1s.
Oh, thank you. We were just talking a minute ago about the show 1s that you've been involved with. This is my first show 1. So you've been show 1 on a couple. Which ones were you show 1s on?
Well, all of them have been the productions that I've done. My first show 1 was Michigan Cycling Podcast, and that one was probably the easiest one to do, just because I didn't know what I was getting myself into, really.
Right.
And Cache Maniacs did a show 1. That was, again, very different from the normal ones, because my show 1 was the intro show.
Oh,
talking about what it was, giving you some basics, then we went to show 2, but I had the interviews for shows 2, 3, 4, and 5, I think it was, recorded before we even did the intro.
Oh, okay.
So
those are all
it's
audio.
all pre-recorded. Yeah, it's all pre-recorded stuff. We actually did some video shows with that one as well, but that wasn't until after the launch event that we started with the videos. And we actually had a launch event for that. Had about 60 or 70 people, I think, show up. Did a little bit of a spiel, introduced it. And we took that room before the intro event for the cachers and did 3 or 4 video interviews with local cachers.
Well, very cool.
And then after that was Cachers of the Roundtable. Then,
right.
Geo Gearheads, and I think that's all of the show 1s that I've done.
Well, that's neat. Well, you get to be part of the show 1 here tonight, and we're going to jump right into geocaching news because I want to really get into the show topic with Darryl. So we're going to move right on ahead. Geocaching news is sponsored by FTF Magazine. FTF Magazine can be found at ftfgeocacher.com. And I do want to take a moment and show on the screen. I've got the latest issue of FTF Magazine, volume 7. I think that's the year, and issue 2. So I highly suggest getting a subscription to FTF Magazine. Keith does a great job of putting things together. This episode, or this magazine, has some really cool things about gear for your geocaching bag. The usual great articles, always one by Podcacher. Sunny and Sandy do a good job on that, and some other great stories that you really need to check out. And of course, my other buddy, Tom Brotherman, Electric Water Boy, has his puzzle primer section. And so that's always a fun read. So Geocaching Magazine. So we have a couple items in the news. And the first one we're going to talk about is about Cachely. So Darryl, why don't you tell us a little about that news article?
All right. Yeah, we just had Nick from Cachely on Geo Gearheads. Got to talk with him quite a bit, both during and after the show. That's always when it's the most fun, is after you stop recording. But
Exactly.
if he mentioned this, I completely missed it with all of the other cool stuff he talked about. And on the blog, he actually posted that check marks are going to be shown in the icons when you do your field notes and pending logs. So this is all about when you don't actually post those notes to geocaching.com yet. So, you save for later, that kind of thing. Now it's going to actually give you an indication that you found that, because that was causing some problems for people in the past. And it was one of the features that he's been working on, and now it's available.
Awesome. Yeah, in fact, Tom is on tonight, Electrical Water Boy, and he just said, "Hey, Gary and Darryl, love Cachely. We do love Cachely." Next article is interesting. I switched it. I had another one, but it wasn't really. This one's more relative to this week, and it's started following the story about some geocachers that were doing 48 states and DC in 1 week. And there's a website you can check out. It's called 48-n-1wk.com. And they have a blog set up there, and they finished their trip. And I'm going to try to get Glenn to come on the show. Glenn and Carrier are some people I contacted about this, but they did 48 states, and they did a geocache in every state. And I don't know what what drove them to think that this was something to do. It sounded like they had a great time. I don't know if I would ever do something like that. They obviously it's sort of a great number to do for, do all the states in a week. Part of their regrets, of course, was that some of the states they did at night. So they kind of all look alike at night, but they were able to finish it. So check out their blog. And Darryl, you think you would ever try to do 48 states in 1 week? I mean, I know you do, crazy geocaching things like geocaching, where y'all do 400 or 500 geocaches in a night, but
it's not that bad.
I
think my max is still like 201 or something like that caches.
It's still unbelievable.
24-hour period.
You think you would drive that far?
Oh, if I had the time, and because you're going to need some recovery time for this too, for certain, and a lot of planning time. But this is that kind of thing, like doing the ET highway, where it's all about pushing yourself to do the most you can. And think about the challenge caches they'll be able to complete after doing 48 states and the District of Columbia in just a week.
In 1 week, yes, crazy. It's anyway neat. Go check out the blog. I've been reading along as they did it. Fun. So by all means, check that out. And then sometime, hopefully in the future, I'm trying to have one of them on the show to discuss. So tonight, we're going to talk about Darryl. And this is interesting. This is I'm really going to confuse people, and I that's just the way it's going to be. This is show 1, PS1, or profile show 1. Next week, I'm having Sydney on. We're going to talk a little bit about planning with Project GC, and that's going to be a topical show, number 1. And Darryl, you unfortunately are the genesis of this idea to do this. So,
which I blame on my first geocaching show, which was all about the geocachers.
Right.
It was inside the Cacher Studio is what we had nicknamed it.
Oh, cool. So you get all the credit and all the blame at the same time, because somebody's going to go, what? So, but I did mix them. So we're going to do profile shows and topical shows. But tonight's a profile show talking about Darryl. And I guess really I need to start off. And I've probably heard this before because I've been listening to you. I used to, I guess I first came across Darryl, if I can tell briefly, was on the Geocaching podcast. And I think at the time you were still doing two shows, but that was my first time, and that was the first show, first podcast. So shout out to all the guys on Geocaching Podcast. Still love the show to this day. I mentioned that in my little point 5 show, but Darryl was on there a few years ago, and then left and really just geo gearheads now, other
Right.
than being on other shows too, for guesting. But
Yeah. Well, there was a point in which I was on 3 shows on a regular basis. I was producing 2 of them.
wow,
I did Cache Maniacs and Cachers of the Round Table, and then I co-produced Geocaching Podcast with Xpunk X.
Oh,
the
yes,
first Andy, the founder of the show.
the founder, which is very cool. That was before I was listening, but you've probably mentioned this, but DarrylW4, is there a, where does the
It's one of those perfect things that everyone always hears about. You get it assigned at some point in the early days of your computing, and it just sticks with you. So DarrylW4 was assigned to me by the beta version of America Online, which was called something else at the time. I don't even remember the name. It might have been called like Quantum Link or something, because I believe at the time Quantum owned AOL and was working on developing it. So I was assigned DarrylW4, and I ended up using it there and just about everywhere else because it worked. It fits the requirements for usernames, and I don't have to think about it anymore.
That's right. Yeah. Growing up, I was sort of always slinky, but like you said, I don't know when. I think G-Slink was something that was assigned to me like at work, because it was the first letter of my first name and the first 4 digits of my last name, or four letters of my last name. And like you said, it just stuck. I never moved on from that. So it's not as nice to view it as, or not as sexy as Slinky Mama. She's got a great name. Everybody loves that one. But anyway, back to the show. Let's talk about, let's talk first about your first geocaching trip, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, the first geocaching trip was in the early days of my caching. I don't think I'd been even caching for a month. And it was one of those, anyone who's from the area knows about Mackinac Island. And even a lot of people outside of the area know about Mackinac Island, because it's this quaint island where motor vehicles aren't really permitted. They are, but you're just not allowed to use them during normal hours. And I've actually been forced off the road by dump trucks and things on the island.
Oh my!
But it's a cool place to go for a nice, easy summer trip. If you just want to hang out in the downtown area, there's lots of like gyp joining kind of stuff, that typical tourism thing. And there's some beautiful scenery on the island, and it had been a fort in the early days of the area. So we went up there and picked out a few caches along the island, which was not an easy task to do back then. And did our first virtual on the island, and that was really kind of frustrating at the time because we didn't totally get what a virtual cache was.
Right.
Which I think is part of the reason why they disappeared, and I'm really sad because they became my favorite type. But ended up doing probably about 10 or 11 caches on the island that day.
Wow.
I might
that's pretty good.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look, but it was really hard for us to do that because we were on bikes. We were using those early GPSRs. We had the printed sheets with us because, you didn't have, this is like, it's about 11 years ago now. So it was a totally different world for caching at the time, but that was it. I was hooked. My girlfriend at the time, she was hooked, and when we started talking about it, I was looking at geocaching because it's a location-based way to mark stuff. That's what I was looking for. And geocaching kept popping up. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to play with this to see if I can figure out how this location stuff works and if I might be able to do something with like an audio tour. because that's what I really wanted to do.
Hmm.
But I was talking about it, she's like, that sounds stupid. By the time we found the first traditional cache, she was done. She was hooked. That was it. She had to go find more. So it really cemented that. And I think we were hunting around for caches back on the mainland by that point to do, just because we were that hooked on geocaching that we had to do more.
Wow. What year was that?
That would have been 2005.
Okay. Right. Yeah. I think you and I have talked about this before because we started caching in 06, so we weren't too far behind you, but we have some similar experiences, and we'll talk about some of our tech gadgets here in a moment. But so from that, you also had you went to an event. Was that in 05 as well?
Yeah, I want to say that was in October, and we had gone to Mackinac in like August. So it had only been a couple of months. We drove something like an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to this event that we really knew nothing about. And the first event we go to is called the Migo Fall Fun Days, which is this big geocachers from all over the state, because Migo's the state organization, come together. And I don't know how many cachers were actually there, but I swear it was a mega event. It felt like a mega. There were, hundreds of people there. They did
Right.
a poker run, and we had never heard of what a poker run was. We didn't understand it, but we were going to do it, and we came really close to getting every one of the stops that day. We ended up missing it because I made a mistake in not scrolling out enough after we punched in all the coordinates by hand on the sheet.
Yes.
And there's one cache like way up north that we ended up missing.
You missed. Oh well, but still, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it was an awesome time. Again, it got us hooked on events and kind of spoiled us for events because it was such a well done event with so many cachers there. But we were amazed when we came back, because it was like 2 months into caching, 3 months into caching, whatever it was, and we had come very close to finishing. We were very upset at ourselves for not finishing, but we had finished with time to spare, minus the cache that we forgot, and
Right.
most of the other cachers hadn't been able to get anywhere near that many, or were coming back later. So we placed pretty well at the completion part of it. Of course, we didn't come anywhere close to having what we were supposed to have as far as the card hand, but it was just an awesome experience, and we learned a lot of important things in that one, like don't look down at your GPS when you're walking across the bridge with the benches painted the same color as the deck of the bridge.
Oh no.
She smacked right into it.
Oh no.
Big gash on her leg. She's laying down on the bench, laughing up a storm, because it's one of those. What else are you going to do? You just did something stupid that you probably shouldn't have been doing. But it was so fun to,
Yeah.
we had a blast pushing ourselves, and, accidents are bound to happen.
Well, true, but how I can feel that right now. I've done something like that before, and oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's
never no. It's like stepping on a Lego. Never.
It's funny. It's funny, but it's never fun.
No. Well, that's awesome. I mean, it really does sound like you had a great event, great start to everything. Would you say that part of your prowess that day was the fact that you were probably better at the tech than some of the people? Because back then,
probably not, actually, because we were up against some really skilled people who had done this kind of thing. People were bringing the laptops with the inverters in the truck, and they were firing it up, working as teams, and we didn't know anyone yet. This was our first trip out. We didn't even know this was going to happen. I had loaded caches in the area, no idea what the other stuff was, so we didn't do anything with that. Get up there, and people are loading their caches in the trucks, and multiple teams, and it's like, yeah, these guys are serious about it. So we didn't know what we were doing, and we still ended up that far ahead, which is why we were so happy with how we placed.
Oh
But
yeah.
it was not at all because we were not paying attention to the deck. We did have a plan before we even got the sheets and got to the car. And what we ended up doing was I was driving and navigating off one where we only put in like the first couple of caches. And then
Okay.
she was loading the other ones and then swapped units so that we got the full scope pretty quickly. But we were already moving. So, that was a big thing at the time. And that's what I really attribute our success to, is that we didn't wait to hand enter all 30 chords or whatever by hand.
Sure. Well, that's good. Yeah. Um, but interesting. So I'm going to show now Magellan Sport Track Pro.
Yeah, that was the first unit I had, which
Okay.
of course, I didn't have that unit for geocaching. I had actually picked that unit up probably about 2002, and it was used for marking locations for doing video shoots.
Right.
We were marking each and every location so that we knew which crossings this train would go past, because that's the stuff I was working on at the time. Documenting each location, putting in all that information into a database, and building our shot sheets and agendas off of that.
Right.
So it worked pretty well for that, but we didn't actually use most of the features. So there was still a big learning curve with that stuff. And the serial loading was a pain, and I never got that really working right. But it took a good 3 or 4 months to actually get it to the point where I could take a GPX off of geocaching.com and load it. Yeah, and none of this stuff worked with the apps that the companies actually provided. It was one of those you needed to go out and find another app to actually do stuff, like load a GPX file. So you had to go through all of that garbage. It doesn't have much information. You could put a GC number in, maybe a little bit more information, but not much. So everything was on printed pages.
Oh, sure.
It took quite a bit to go caching in those days with GPS. And of course, a GPS in a phone was unheard of.
Oh, of course. Yeah. So I found this. I think I'm sharing this. Are you seeing this too, Darryl?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So people that are listening, I'll sort of give an explanation of what we're viewing live. But I pulled up your Magellan Sport Track Pro at eBay. Yeah, I can buy it right now for $39.99. They're still selling, or somebody's selling one of these. So
yeah, well, it was a good, reliable unit. It has its quirks, but and that was one of the things
like a good unit.
days.
Yeah,
back in the days, Garmin had their quirks and Magellan had their quirks.
Mm-hmm.
If you had the Magellan, it would do this boomerang effect. So you knew that when you got within about 40, 50 feet of the cache, you had to slow down, maybe even stop, because a lot of times you'd actually pass by the cache.
Yes.
As it did a boomerang. Garmin had some other issues with it, like it would tell you that you were at the cache before you got there. And it was all the way that they were doing their computations with these rather weak processors and older hardware. Now, we have so much more processing power that these kind of problems just are unheard of.
It does look like a very cool unit. But yeah, like you said, I was going to show.
Well, to give an idea of just how early in the technology this stuff was, they did make a color version. This was a black and white, but they did make a color version. However, most people told you don't get it because the color screen seems to interfere with the reception.
Okay.
So if you got the color version, you might not get a good location. It's fine if you're, driving around and trying to stick to the roads. But if you're out in the backcountry, you could be 40, 50 feet off.
Right. That's crazy. Nowadays, we think, you and I don't think twice about it because we had to live through it. But some people probably are like, you guys are insane. But I like that you load the batteries down there. So let me stop screen sharing for a moment because I want to show. I won't talk much about this item, but okay. So this is our first one we had was a Meridian Gold, and this one actually the screens that you had on your on that unit look a lot like the unit. A lot of
Oh, they were the same vintage. I had one of the color meridians that I originally got for cycling, and marking trails, and that's actually what I was going to use. But again, the color one didn't work quite as well, so we ended up not using that one. We used it, but it was more like the secondary unit. And Renee liked that one, or I'm sorry, Dree liked that one better because it was a bigger screen, which is why I had it on the bike.
Right. Yeah, I like but it had this funky. Did y'all have the same funky?
It was the same cable for both.
Okay.
So you had the pogo pins with the screw in the center.
Right. It worked great. Like you said, if we could we weren't near as prolific as you guys were as finding caches, but Susan and I, we'd print out like a dozen, and we're like, we're not going to get to 12 caches today, but you'd print them out. And back then, I'm sure y'all did this, probably something similar, is till you got to learn north, south, east, west on a GPS, or you'd kind of walk till you got to your north. Okay, I'm at north, so we're north now.
The very first cache I had done, I could not get the go-to to work. I'd put the waypoint in, but I couldn't get it to work.
Oh, okay.
So I'm sitting there staring at the coordinates. Okay, a little more. Okay, there. I'm there. Start walking. Oh, now I'm off on that one. Shoot. So I'm going back and forth. Came back. I just upset as all heck because, among other things, I stepped on a bee and stung my toe. But came back later on and avenged that DNF after I had figured out how to get the go-to to work, which, if I remember, I actually did have to update the firmware to make it work.
Right.
It wasn't, I think, a firmware issue per se. It was that the firmware that I had wasn't letting me use my waypoint or something like that. I screwed something up in the process, so I had to redo it, and after the firmware update, it worked.
Yeah, we got better at just like y'all did. We got better at being able to do two things at once, which was head to the north coordinate and the west coordinate at the same time. Oh my gosh, it's awesome. So you kind of learn how to angle toward the geocache, but and then you would just people today don't, I guess, think, but back then we would mark on the piece of paper. Susan would make a note, DNF, or she'd mark when we found it.
Yep.
And then come home and sit there and put them all in the computer.
So. Yeah, and you had to sit down, you had to go and log them, and no one thought twice about taking a week before you logged a find, because it might take you that long to get back to a computer and sit down. Laptops still weren't all that popular back then. You usually had to go to a computer, sit down at the computer, and dial up your modem, because a lot of people were still on modems.
Yep.
Go through that whole BS. But I'll tell you, the biggest change for me came when paperless caching became a reality, and I used a M505 instead of paper.
Yes.
The way I started was the Mobi reader.
I'm gonna pull that up while you talk about it. Go ahead.
All right. And the way that Pocket Queries used to work was you had the option of getting a Mobi book with all of the cache information. So you'd get the GPX, plus you'd get this book, this ebook that had each of the caches, everything's indexed, so that you can find it. And that was the way that they were delivering the paperless stuff. So you didn't need a special app, because there really weren't many apps out there, and the ones that were out there weren't especially good. I think Windows CE had like one or two apps that weren't too bad, but they were slow.
Right.
And the Mobi book was, not quick, but by comparison, very fast. But that all ended when Amazon acquired Mobi, and the Moby books became what's now the Kindle format. And geocaching.com lost the license because they wouldn't do any more licenses because they were wrapping it into their own format.
Right.
The app went unsupported, and it's like, yeah, it's done. You can't do it. And that's really when you started to see development on a lot of these other ones. And Cachemate was what I was using.
Sure.
And that really became popular, and everyone was using Cachemate on both Windows and on Windows CE and on the Palm. And that was really what it was. And loading the GPSs got a lot better, in large part because we weren't dealing with serial connections anymore. But even the ones that did moved up from 9,600 baud to 3,800.
Right.
Or 38,000 rather. So you could load stuff a lot quicker.
Right. Exactly. By the way, this one is for sale, $27, and you get a 1-year warranty. I don't know if they really can get a warranty on these things anymore, but
well, it's probably a cashback guarantee is more likely what it is.
Probably so. But yeah, it looks kind of cool. We were talking about it before the show that the grid looks a little like a phone, kind of, sort of, but.
Well, a lot of what happened with smartphones was based on the Palm, because that became the Treo, which before the iPhone was the most popular phone for a long time. It was what most businesses had switched to, and then the iPhone came along and changed everything.
Now, during this time, were you doing pretty much every type of geocache, or were you pretty much just doing traditional? Were you?
Oh, we would do everything we could get our hands on, though. Puzzle caches weren't very common. We did have a lot of the multi-caches, the solve on site multis, where you had to go and find something,
Right.
do this math, and then go to the next stage. Okay. So we loved doing that kind of stuff, which wasn't always easy with a lot of those GPSRs. And with that Moby format, what I probably didn't mention is there was no really good way to put in your finds or anything on those. So what we ended up doing is we'd highlight the title of the cache, and you could do a bookmark with your notes. So it just put the time that we found it, and that way it would sort into the right order. And then you go back and you do, little notes if you needed to, log was all it would say.
Right.
And we know that the log was in need of replacement. And because of that, you just go through your bookmarks, write down, okay, yep. Find the GC number, punch it in, go and log it, find the GC number, punch it in. You had to do it right away before you forgot what those caches were.
That's awesome. Yeah, those are, and we would get it done. I mean, it just, we obviously, like you said, we weren't the quickest back then, but we were finding caches. I mean, we found quite, even in our first year, we would find quite a few. I don't think we really did too many multis. We did a few, but there weren't that many really out there. Mostly it was traditional, I think, back then for a lot of very few. Like you said, I don't remember any puzzles back in 06 or 07.
That's something that kind of developed. And, it's a lot about the cachers in your area.
It is.
If someone had discovered puzzle caching in your area back in 2005, you probably had some puzzle caches. We didn't have too many, but we had a couple, if I recall, that all of them, though, I want to say had to be solved on site, including a number of them where there's a virtual right nearby.
Sure.
Because I don't even know that they had a proximity rule back then.
Oh gosh, I don't.
I remember changing the proximity rule, and I thought, well, there was a change. I didn't know there was one. Right.
Yeah.
And this is also the locationless caches were archived. Then the webcams and virtuals were grandfathered back in 2005. So it was maybe it was 2006, but it was so quick that I had never done a locationless before they were archived.
Yeah. No, I was same. We were the same. And we didn't really we hit some in '06, but wow, we were just starting, and we didn't, we weren't going to branch out till we kind of knew what
Yeah, I
we were
didn't
we were
understand how they
doing.
worked at all by before they were archived, and then of course, as soon as they were archived, that's when I figured out how they worked.
Right.
Figures.
Yeah, exactly. So, talk a little bit about CacheMate, because you kind of got into CacheMate fairly early in your geocaching career.
Yeah, and that really just was a way to get in and log the caches, get the information as well. But
Okay.
you just had to end up with a list again that you have to log manually online. But that one
Mhm.
actually took the GPX file, and it was not an easy process to get that stuff in. It was easier to do the Mobi format than the Cachely or the
Mhm.
Cachely, the
Yeah.
CacheMate format.
Right.
So, you didn't really go through a whole lot, and you could only get 500 caches in anyway. But you did the 500 closest caches to home like every week so that you had them all in there and you knew what it was. And you loaded the GPS every week so that you could always go out and find a cache on the spur of the moment. It
Sure.
was just the way that you learned to do things because you couldn't go out like now. We don't think twice about loading
No.
caches. We just pull up the phone if we don't have the GPS loaded. And
Exactly.
quite frankly, I don't use the GPS much anymore myself.
I'm kind of like with you. I mean, I mostly use my iPhone, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. So after that, you did get into some other products. What are some other things that
Well,
you
one of the things that
used?
was most interesting was the Rhino 500 series, again from Garmin. And it was
Mm-hmm.
essentially a hybrid in the hardware between like an eTrex and a 60 CSX
Mm-hmm.
with a FRS GMRS radio. So it had the walkie talkies in there, plus you could send location data.
Okay.
So that was really interesting and kind of led to some interesting questions about where technology would take us. And one of the things we really enjoyed doing with those units, though they were not all that accurate, was okay, we can't find this cache. You go stand over here. I'll go stand over here. Send the locations because that way we can see where it is on the map in comparison to the cache location and kind of figure out where to look.
Right. Well, hey, and it worked.
It wasn't, yeah, it was really intended so that, okay, we're, half a mile apart. Where are you? But of
Mm.
course, the radios didn't actually work well enough to transmit that far. But
Sure.
it was an interesting concept, and the units worked pretty well until like a firmware update, I think it was, that caused us some issues. And
Oh.
that's when I moved to the 60 CSX full time. And that was my main GPSR for quite a long time. And Dree was using the Magellan Explorers XL,
Mm-hmm.
which was
Seen
really
that.
cool because that one actually did do paperless caching, just not well. You couldn't mark that you had done the cache, and you could like go to the cache and get the information, but that was it. It was read only, so you had to
Oh.
remember that you had done it. It wouldn't take them off the screen or anything.
So you have to make a mental note or make a jot.
Right. As to which
Yeah.
ones you did and all that kind of thing. And with the 60 CSX, you could at least take that cache icon and mark it as found. It would change it to the open treasure chest and put an entry on the calendar. So I could go back there and go through that calendar and tell which caches I had done. The
Oh wow.
Magellan Explorers XL had the great icons. It had the color screen. It really was an interesting concept, but you had to use their Windows only app to parse your GPX file and load it in. And I want to say it would only handle like 250 geocaches, but it had all the information
Yeah. Well, yeah.
and the icons. It had the right icons.
So in a sense, you really were paperless. I mean, you had
It
extra
was.
steps, but it
Yeah.
really was.
But it wasn't technically paperless caching because paperless caching came out with the Oregon, Colorado series. And I actually got the 300 and did some reviews on that one for, I want to say it was Podcaster as well, but I know I did the review for Ice and Rise geocaching video zine.
Okay.
And that was an interesting one to put together because it's such a different unit. It was the first one to have the paperless caching. It really was a totally different GUI, and it had the very, very bizarre rock and roller wheel. So you had the directional pad on the roller wheel with a select button, and then it had the roller so that you could do like your jogging through lists.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It was a very bad idea. It was a cool idea, but it was bad. But that's the one that actually did the paperless caching for the first time, where you could actually drop a GPX file onto it. It would create the field notes text file, which could then be uploaded to geocaching.com, and then you went through, and it really did change everything.
You know, and a lot of people, I think, even to this day, well, yeah, I think a lot of people today, I have friends that still use a lot of GPSRs out of the Oregon series.
Yeah, the Oregon was the one that actually made that work well, because the Colorado had a whole bunch of problems, but it was also the one that introduced Where I Go. And I actually went to Chicago's Garmin store, which at the time was the only one. I think they actually have like 2 or 3 now. But I went to the store, met with Jeremy Irish, who was doing a talk about Where I Go there. And we actually went and did the Where I Go test cartridge out in front of the store. The whole class went and found the virtual cache down the street. You know, it was an interesting time, and it was cold too.
Which, you know, is interesting. Where I Goes, even to this day, a lot of people have never done it. Where I Go, I've only done a handful, and I own one, but nobody. You know, around here, a traditional cache, a finds, you know, is to me is a great thing. That poor Where I Go, that little cache, he's very lonely out there by himself because nobody wants to do, you know.
It's still a challenge to do a Where I Go, not from the author's perspective, because that's not the easiest thing either, but from the finder's perspective, it's a challenge to find the right app, make it work right, get the cartridge in. It's not as easy as it really should have been.
Yes.
But I was really interested in the Where I Go format because it kind of finally looked like I was going to have something to fulfill that promise of the audio tours. So I went and bought a Mio DigiWalker, which was one of the few Windows CE devices that was supported for doing Where I Go testing. And that's when I realized Where I Go needed some major changes before it could actually work.
Right.
You can do a bunch of stuff on the Windows CE side that you couldn't do on the Garmin player because there's no speakers for one. So you couldn't do any audio. And on the Windows CE side, they would let you do some audio. But just trying to get more than about 3 or 4 zones on that player with the DigiWalker bogged it down to the point where it was completely unusable. So that was it. I was like, yeah, Where I Go isn't going to work.
Well, yeah, and who knows where I Goes will go, you know, from here to the future. But okay, so from there, you and let me mention some of the in the Q&A. Electric Water Boy mentioned, he says, I love my Colorado 300. The on-off button fell off, the wheel fell off, and it got lost. So we replaced it last summer with an Oregon 650.
Yeah, 650s are totally different units, and they don't have Where I Go anymore.
Very cool. Well, not cool that that's gone, but very cool that he replaced it with something. Doc Firewoman is in Q&A. She mentioned that she wants to get a few states on her way to GeoWoodstock 14, which I will be out at. I'm sad, Darryl, that you're not going this year.
No, not this year.
Well,
usually I do every other year, but yeah, I couldn't do it this year again.
Yeah, I understand. That's okay. But um, we're Susan and I are gonna make the trek out, hit Mingo, and all that other good stuff along the way. So we're looking forward to our little trip. But oh well. So you moved on to. Did you
Yeah.
really use it? Did you use a Nuvi?
Well, I'd use the Nuvies in the car.
Okay.
And this is again before you had the phones.
Okay. Yep.
So, you'd have the Nuvi that you load. And the way I did that one was I loaded the POIs because that you could just strip out real quick and easy. The
Yeah.
bookmarks, you had to either delete them all or one by one. And deleting them all meant that I had to delete the addresses I put in there too. So that didn't work very well. So I had the Nuvi that with the POIs. And I'd use, at that point, I was already up to the Oregon 200 and 400, one of each because we had the two of us.
Right.
And use those to actually find the caches, get the cache information. But we'd do the Nuvies to get us to and from the caches. But that's kind of about the time, too, when I actually had the iPod Touch.
Okay.
Like that one enough. Not that it really worked for geocaching in the touch version, but the iPhone certainly did. The 3G added the GPS.
Mm-hmm.
People started using it, and we saw an app come out. Actually, there was a web app before the 3GS actually came out that would let you do some paperless caching. But of course, the web app doesn't work with the iPod Touch because there's no data connection to it.
Yes.
But I ended up with iGeocacher, which was an app where you could load the GPX files and actually do it. But it was good enough to find caches, kind of. Yeah,
right.
In the loosest sense of the word. But more importantly, it was a good supplement for the Oregons because I could bring up the cache information there, take care of the logging and stuff on a decent keyboard. But this is when the official app from geocaching.com came out too, and I was using that for a little while, but really didn't end up using that too much. I did move to the to Geosphere when that came out, and that was on the iPhone 3G still. I had to go through the 3GS because I was just killing the 3G with the performance. Ended up moving to the 4. And by the time I was on the 4, I wasn't taking the GPSR with me as much.
Mm-hmm.
When the iPhone 5 came out, that was it. I was pretty much done, but I did still upgrade. I ended up with several different units, including the DeLorme PN40. I had tried the 60, but the 60 kind of just never really worked as well for me.
Sure.
And of course, the GPS Map 62 ST.
Oh yes, GPS. I know people still use those to this day.
Oh yeah. Well, they're only a generation old because the 64s are the current version. I kind of think we're going to see something before too long. But the main difference, as far as we would be concerned, is Bluetooth on the 64s.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Geosphere. We need to talk about this a little bit because you love Geosphere. You love it a lot. And you're still clinging, but you're about to let your grasp go of Geosphere?
We're probably tomorrow at WWDC going to hear about iOS 10.
Okay. Yeah.
My guess, Geosphere will not work under iOS 10. We don't know for sure, but it's not even iOS 7 compliant.
Right.
You can't make updates to the app as it stands right now because it's so old that they won't accept the compiled code from it.
Oh boy. Well, it's hard to give up on an app you love so much, but
yeah, and that served me so well. It's been everything for so long. But yeah, I am moving toward Cachely, which you love, and it's incredible to see the progress that this has made since it launched. Because when it came out, it was an interesting product, but like some of the other geocaching apps, it's an interesting product, but doesn't really work for me.
Yeah, and I really do. Everybody needs to go listen to your latest show on Geo Gearheads with Nick Hubbard from Cachely. Nick and I have, stayed in touch, and I'm going to have him on the show at some point in the near future. He's going to be out at Geo Woodstock 14 doing a seminar. So I suggest anybody that's out there and is interested in the app, or at least if you don't, well, either if you own it and use it, or if you're interested in it and want to find out more, and you're going to be at Geo Woodstock, I would suggest taking some time to stop by and see him do that. But so many things that you mentioned on the show y'all did recently, to me, really is such a positive. I mean, he definitely does respond quickly. Scott was, I loved it. Scott was asking a lot of interesting, fun questions. He really got into the the customer support for your show during that. But but you know what? It was really interesting. And, Nick really is very responsive, and he's done a lot with Cachely. And
there's so much more on the board that will be coming.
Yeah. And Slinky Mama, she's, how you're kind of like, I don't really want to let go of Geosphere because I really love it. She loves the classic app, the geocaching classic app. And I told her, I said, honey, it's going away. It's not going to be around much longer. And she's like, oh, I'm going to use it until the thing doesn't work anymore.
Which there's a good chance that it's going to be in October when iOS 10 is actually released. Not that we know that iOS 10 is released and that it's going to break all this stuff, but the writing is kind of on the wall for a lot of these older apps.
And see, Susan, she will, I know this is going to sound crazy, she will not upgrade her iOS if she has to, if she doesn't have to upgrade it. See, I'll say that right.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I stuck with, I want to say it was iOS 7 for a while because of some issues with iOS 8 on Geosphere. I could be wrong. I could have been like, I was sticking with 6 instead of going to 7, but yeah, that's a critical enough app that it was an issue. But that's why I'm lining up my ducks now so that I can move to Cachely and be all happy on Cachely.
Excellent. Well, before we get into our product review of the week, did you want to mention anything else about where we're at with some of your products that you use? You mentioned the eTrex 30.
Yeah, I have the eTrex 30 is like the GPS that I use now. And right. I don't use it very often. It's mostly for when I go out and place a cache. But the thing that's really sad is I keep taking that thing with me. It's powered on. It's loaded up. I go route to the cache. 4 caches later, I go, oh, I have the eTrex 30 and it's still routing to this other cache. I just don't use it anymore. It's so much cleaner to just use the iPhone. And I don't know how you're caching with the phone, but the way that I typically cache is I use the satellite maps and I find a placeholder or two, or place marker rather, or two, like maybe there's a picnic table or a big tree. And it's like, okay, it's over here. I put down the phone. I just walk over there and I start looking. I don't even look at the phone. And this is part of why I like the smartphone caching so much. With like the 60 and the 62, it's pretty much, okay, follow it. Okay, it's right here. Okay, there. It took a lot of the fun out of the hunt that we had back in the early days of caching, because you had so many flaws in the GPS technology that you had to go and search.
So you did, because your radius was big. I mean, you had the flaws of housing. Yeah. But at best, you're looking at 150 feet at least.
Right. I mean, I liked the whole thing about the smartphone, where it's like, okay, I have a couple of spots that I can look. I'm going to start here, and then I'll go back to it if I need it. So it just makes it a little bit more fun. And I find caches usually much easier that way. But it's easier and it's more fun.
I agree. We did a bunch yesterday out in the woods, and I was kind of like that. We struggled at times, but he was pretty accurate, even out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, I
We
was
had
just about to say the problem with my technique with the satellites is in those woods. There, you're
yes,
just going, here's the arrow, here's the pin. There I am now. I've got the cache. But even then, this is one of the great things about the satellite maps too. If you stare at those satellite maps and you get used to it, you can see the hiking trails through the trees usually.
yes,
And that's saved me a boatload of times where it's like, how do I get to this cache? Oh, here, I see the trail. I see where. Okay, yeah, okay. So if we go here, we go here. Okay, there it is. You follow
yes.
these weird lines between the trees that you just eventually instinctively know are trails.
Yes, and that's like you said. The fun is getting near the cache and then finding it. It's not necessarily fun to be trudging through and avoiding, bushwhacking through a forest and going, wow, I'm having a lot of fun getting to this one cache when I could have just taken a trail, like you said, to get near it. Then I can hunt because I want to hunt. I don't really want to bushwhack through today I'm not bushwhacking. I'm trying to find geocaches. So, you kind of get that, like you said, try to use what you can, what's available nowadays on a phone. So, okay, well, we're going to talk a little bit. Each week I'm going to have a product review of the week. It is sponsored by Cachely. Ironically, Cachely, the foremost geocaching app, and you can find Cachely at cach.ly. And this week's some of the weeks I'm going to do the product, and sometimes our guest will do the product. This week, Darryl has a product that he wants to talk about. So, tell us about this product, Darryl.
Well, some people might know what a panorama is. More people probably are going to be familiar with the term VR, though. And VR in the real world mostly means like a 360-degree view where you can go all the way around, all the way up and down, and get a sense of what it's like to be standing that location. And I've loved the panoramas and the 360 images because it's an easy way to get a real sense of place. So when I heard about the Ryko Theta S series way back like 3 years ago when they first came out, I was a little interested, but it really didn't seem to be quite there yet. And it's this cool little device that has two cameras, one on either side with fisheye lenses so that it can capture the entire world, including the hand that's holding it. So it's a little tricky to use one of these things.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And then it takes those two images, stitches them together, and you end up with a 360 image that you can either view as a big flat image that looks really weird and cool, or you put it into a viewer and you can pan around and see everything in stills. Well, the Theta S came out not quite a year ago, and it's still in somewhat short supply because it is a newer product. And with all the interest in VR, people are jumping on these things. And it actually does video as well as the stills. Now, it does 1080 video, which I know sounds like it's going to be pretty good. But you have to remember that 1080 video is its total video image. When you're dealing with something like VR, you're cropping in on that. So it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And because it's just two lenses and there's all the distortion, those seams, stuff in between those two doesn't have a whole lot of pixels. Okay. So when you start playing with it, the video is very cool because, yes, you can pan around, you can see everything. And one of the first things I did was try to do a geocache hunt where you're kind of looking over my shoulder as I try to find this cache. You couldn't see the cache at all.
Oh, no.
It's too small in the frame, no matter what you do. So it has a lot of coolness, but it's just not really there yet. You're going to need a lot more, I think, than the 1080 to make it viable, but it's still a really cool product and a really fun thing. If you're into capturing that sense of place, then you certainly need to look at the Theta S. And I will mention the Nikon Key Mission coming out supposedly end of the summer. And that's actually going to be a 1080 or it's 4K rather camera, similar to this one, but it's an action camera.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's going to be more durable. It's going to be a lot more expensive. The target price is apparently closer to $600. This is about 400, a little less most places. So, you can find this one. It's a nice little handheld camera. If you're looking to capture that sense of place,
And Darryl's showing it right now.
yep. It's just a nice little thing that you can, I put it in a little belt clip, carry it around. I can go and pop 360s stills, and those have plenty of detail for actually getting a sense of where you are. If you're looking for some of that experiential kind of thing, it's still a lot of fun. I take this to the zoo a lot of the time, give people an idea of what the new exhibit looks like. A lot of my YouTube videos lately have been 360s at the Pigorium. People really seem to love that. But one of the more interesting ones was a speeder at one of the, what was it called? Railroad Days down in Toledo. One of the clubs down there with people that have these little speeders. They're basically go-karts for train tracks.
Oh, okay.
Maintenance crews use these things to get around a little bit easier. They can't take a full train because that's too big and too heavy and too expensive. So they run around in these little like go-karts. And there's clubs that collect these things, bring them back, restore them. So they were giving people rides just up and down. So I just took the thing and kind of stuck it, over my shoulder, braced it. We went down and back, and it was really a lot of fun because you got the sense of not only how the place looks, how the cars, the interior of these cars looked, but you also got the sense that these seats don't turn around. So when you're going backwards, you don't see anything unless you turn around. So it's a fun toy, not really all that productive. But if you're looking to capture that place sense of place, that little bit of the share that little bit of experience, for $350, which is what I paid for mine, it's not bad. It's not going to be anything great that you're going to love in a few years, and especially if you're looking for something for that HTC Vive or the Oculus Rift, not really going to do it for you. Plus, any of these things right now aren't able to do the stereo images. So it's a 2D image that you just get to pan around. But it's awesome to be able to bring those up on the phone. YouTube lets you do just on your standard phone. You take the thing, you pan around, you're actually spinning in place, looking up, down, and it's like you have a window looking into a different world.
Yeah, that was really cool. And I think there's that you're sort of in the beginning stages of something that I think is very interesting, and you're going to see a lot more of.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of talk about newer stuff that's coming out. Some of the phone manufacturers are getting into cameras like this that are still external because you can't really do something like this on a camera yet. But I would not be surprised if you start seeing some of this making its way into cameras or into phones. If you could find a way to get 4 cameras on the phone, one on either side kind of thing,
right?
One on each side, then you certainly could probably pull it off with the phone. And that would be much better than this is because you have those 4 cameras and it can get that much more detail. Fisheye lenses cause distortion. That's just the way physics work. Right. So you're always going to have problems with that. You get into the professional VR rigs right now, and it's at least 6 cameras.
Sure.
This is only 2, but it's something that you can carry with you. It's relatively cheap, and it's something you can whip out and take a picture.
Very fun. Yep. Well, good. Well, thanks for sharing that. We're going to do our giveaway, and we're going to wrap up the show. But here are the kind of the rules for this this giveaway. I'm going to show you a coin, GeoCoin, and I want you to guess what the app is that is represented by this GeoCoin. And I want you to send me your guess to geocachetalk@gmail.com. First correct answer will win the coin. I'll get back to you then to get your shipping information. So sorry, this week is not for audio listeners. I'll do some as time goes on for everyone. not just the live people, but I want to do a live one tonight, being show number 1 and everything. So I'm going to show it. So get your, as Darryl always says, get your emails ready for show number 1, and I'm going to show the coin, and then send me an email. So let's see if I can show this coin and get it just right. And I'm showing the coin now, hoping it'll maybe not. There it goes. That's your best shot at seeing what it is. That was it. I got to focus for a minute there, Darryl. So that's about as good as it's going to get.
Hey, I know what it is, but of course,
other people. Well, anyway. So again, send me an email. First one to guess correctly what the app is, I'm going to send that to you. So I want to thank Darryl for being on show 1.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. As I was kind of thinking about some different people over the last couple of weeks to have on show 1, Darryl, you rose to the top of my list. So I really do thank you. I've listened to your podcast for years, and it was really was the choice I wanted to go with. I'm so thankful you were able to be on this show with me tonight. And so that
I was able to be on, that I was that high on the list.
You were on the top. So, and again, thank you again. And hopefully we'll have you on again sometime. Maybe we'll do like, once, at very least once a year, maybe on the anniversary of show 1, but maybe I assume before that, I'm hoping to do maybe what we did last year, where we got all the podcasts together. I still think that'd be cool to do.
Sounds good to me. Hey, I was still looking for someone to take on the Caches of the Roundtable. That was a fun show.
Oh, yeah, exciting.
This takes a lot of production.
Yeah, I know. But we definitely want to do a show around the holidays, so that'll be fun. And I think we can rustle up everybody to do that again. So
sure, it's a lot of cats to wrangle, but it's worth it.
It is, but it was so much fun last year, so I hope we can do it again. So, well, anyway, I hope that'll do it for this week. Hope everyone enjoyed the show, and if you did, email me and tell me your comments at geocachetalk@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow on Twitter at geocachetalk and Facebook at facebook.com/geocachetalk. The show can be found on the Geocache Talk YouTube channel, iTunes, as well as Stitcher, and of course the website. I think I mentioned that. Tell your friends about the show, ask them to subscribe, and they too can hear the show on a weekly basis. And don't just talk about geocaching, go geocaching. Good night, everyone.